We've all heard it by now. Ancient humans built impossible structures that still stand today. Places like the Great Pyramid, Machu Picchu, or Stonehenge. Monuments so massive and precise that they're held up as proof of how capable early civilizations really were. But what if I told you that compared to what was attempted in ancient China, those monuments are the easy version? That instead of stacking stones or shaping blocks where they stood, builders carved entire monument pieces directly out of a mountain, each one so large that moving even a single piece would stretch the limits of what seems physically possible. And what happened next is exactly why this monument never entered the history books at all.
On a low mountain east of modern Nanjing, hidden beneath trees and quiet walking paths, there was a place where ambition did not fail gradually but stopped all at once, leaving behind stones so enormous that even today it feels less abandoned than frozen in mid-decision. At first glance, YANGSHAN looks like any other old quarry, its surface cut and scarred by centuries of stone extraction. Yet the moment you move deeper into the site, the scale begins to shift in ways that are difficult to process, because the stone here is not broken into blocks or rubble, but carved into three colossal forms that were never meant to remain where they are. They were meant to move. Cut directly from the mountain are three massive components of what was intended to be the largest stone monument ever attempted in Imperial China, a ceremonial stele designed to honor the founding emperor of the Ming dynasty, and so immense that even before it was finished, it surpassed the scale of nearly every stone structure built before or since. One piece was meant to serve as the base, a vast rectangular pedestal weighing more than 16,000 tons. Another was the body of the stele itself, nearly 50 meters tall in its intended orientation, carved with clean planes and precise edges. The third was the crown, a massive stone head adorned with dragon motifs, meant to rest on top and complete the monument. Together, they would have formed a stone structure more than 70 meters tall, heavier than 30,000 tons, and visible from miles away. But they never left the mountain. What makes YANGSHAN unsettling is not that the project failed, but that it progressed as far as it did without anyone stopping to ask whether the final step was even possible. The cuts are precise, the surfaces are flat. The stone was carefully isolated from the surrounding bedrock, with trenches carved deep around each piece, channels cut for wedges, and edges shaped exactly as they would need to be once erected, which means the builders were not improvising or experimenting, but following a plan they fully expected to complete. And yet, at some point during the process, the realization must have arrived that these stones could not be moved. Not across the uneven terrain, not down from the mountain.
Not across 15 kilometers of land to the Imperial Mausoleum where the stele was meant to stand. No system of rollers, sledges, ramps, manpower, or animals available at the time could transport a single block of this size, let alone three. The project was not paused. It was abandoned. The tools were put down. The stone remained partially attached to the mountain, as if the landscape itself refused to let the monument leave. This is where YANGSHAN becomes more than a story of overconfidence, because the decision to begin cutting stone of this scale was not made lightly. This was the early 15th century, during one of the most powerful periods in Chinese history, when the Ming state was capable of organizing vast labor forces, constructing the Forbidden City, restoring the Great Wall, and launching massive maritime expeditions across the Indian Ocean. This was not a society unfamiliar with logistics, which raises an uncomfortable question. How did a project of this magnitude reach such an advanced stage without anyone calculating the consequences of success? Some historians suggest that the ambition itself was the point, that the Yongle emperor sought to surpass all previous monuments, even if doing so meant pushing beyond practical limits, while others believe the scale grew gradually, expanding beyond feasibility only after work had already begun. But standing at the quarry, looking at stone that has been shaped yet never moved, neither explanation feels complete. Local legends attempt to fill the silence, speaking of brutal labor quotas, exhaustion, and lives lost to impossible demands. Yet even these stories do not explain why the project began at this scale in the first place, or why no smaller test monument was attempted before committing to blocks that could never be moved.
In the hills of southern Japan, hidden beneath bamboo groves and quiet forest paths, in a region once central to the birth of the Japanese state, there rests a single block of stone so large, so deliberately shaped, and so completely out of context that even after centuries of study, no one can say with confidence why it exists at all.
Masuda Iwafune does not rise like a monument, and it does not resemble a ruin in the way ancient structures usually do, because it was never reduced to fragments or reclaimed by the landscape, but instead remains whole, intact, and precisely carved, as if its builders simply walked away once they reached a point where continuation no longer made sense. Carved directly from solid granite, the monolith measures more than 11 meters in length, 8 meters in width, and nearly 5 meters in height, weighing close to 800 tons, making it one of the largest single megaliths in Japan. Yet, unlike tombs, temples, or fortifications, it does not clearly belong to any known architectural category. From a distance, its silhouette feels unnatural because the stone does not follow the irregular contours of a natural outcrop, but instead presents long, straight edges, a flattened upper surface, and angles that suggest deliberate planning rather than erosion or chance. And when you reach the top, the strangeness becomes harder to ignore. Cut into the upper surface are two large square holes, each carved straight down into the granite with sharp corners and uniform depth, features that immediately stand out because square cavities of this precision are rare in early stonework and require sustained effort, careful measurement, and absolute confidence in execution. Between these openings runs a shallow ridge or channel, dividing the stone in a way that feels intentional, as if the surface was meant to accommodate something that never arrived, or to serve a function that was never completed. At the base of the monolith, faint lattice-like markings remain, traces of systematic cutting that suggest the stone was being shaped methodically, not roughly extracted, reinforcing the sense that this was part of a larger plan rather than an isolated experiment. What makes Masuda Iwafune deeply unsettling is not simply that its purpose is unknown, but that it sits among other ancient stoneworks in the Osaka region that do have context, including burial mounds, carved tombstones, and early religious structures, yet this monolith refuses to align neatly with any of them. It is often dated to the late Kofun period, a time when powerful clans were constructing massive keyhole-shaped burial mounds and asserting authority through monumental architecture, and some researchers believe Masuda Iwafune was intended as part of a tomb complex, possibly an unfinished chamber or a massive stone base meant to support something larger. But there is no burial beneath it, no chamber, no remains.
The effort invested in shaping the stone is undeniable. Flattening granite on this scale, carving square holes with straight walls, and maintaining symmetry across such a massive surface would have required organized labor, time, and resources, all directed toward an outcome that was either abandoned or rendered meaningless before completion. And that raises a question that quietly echoes through many ancient sites. At what point did the builders realize that whatever they were creating no longer justified the effort? There are no signs of structural failure, no cracks or flaws in the stone that would force abandonment, and no evidence of external disruption, invasion, or sudden catastrophe that might explain why work stopped. The monolith simply remains, finished enough to show intention, unfinished enough to withhold explanation.
In the hills of eastern India, carved into solid granite that should resist shaping at every stage, there exists a series of chambers that quietly undermine almost everything we assume about early architecture, not because they are large or decorative, but because they are unnervingly controlled. From the outside, the caves look ordinary, even modest, with simple entrances cut into rough stone hills that give no indication of what waits beyond. Yet the moment you step inside, the material reality of the space changes in a way that is difficult to ignore. The walls do not absorb light, they reflect it. The granite surfaces are polished to such a degree that they behave like mirrors, returning reflections cleanly and evenly across flat walls and curved ceilings, without distortion, without interruption, and without the uneven texture that normally reveals how stone has been worked. This alone would be impressive. What makes it disturbing is how sound behaves once you speak. Every word reverberates through the chamber with unusual clarity, expanding and lingering, not chaotically, but evenly, as if the cave itself was shaped to respond to vibration, turning simple speech into something that fills the entire space and refuses to dissipate. These chambers were carved more than 2,000 years ago, during a period when most stone construction relied on visible tool marks, rough finishing, and gradual refinement. And yet here, in some of the hardest rock available, the interiors show no trace of hesitation, no evidence of experimentation, and no sign that the builders were learning as they worked. Everything appears deliberate from the first cut.
What deepens the mystery is that these spaces were not created as royal monuments or public halls meant to impress crowds, but were dedicated to ascetics,
individuals who rejected material excess and lived lives of extreme simplicity, making the investment of such precision feel fundamentally mismatched with the purpose we are told they served. Why would a culture pour immense effort into shaping stone with this level of refinement for people who sought isolation rather than display? Why achieve perfection where functionality alone would have been enough? And then, just as suddenly, it vanished. Later cave complexes across India are vast, ornate, and artistically rich, yet they do not reproduce this level of granite polish on the same scale, suggesting that whatever process made the Barabar interiors possible was either lost, abandoned, or deliberately not passed on. Some of the caves themselves remain unfinished. One of the most elaborate entrances opens into an interior that simply stops, as if work was halted mid-thought, with no surviving explanation for why a project capable of such precision would be left incomplete. There are inscriptions dedicating the caves, but none describing the method. No manuals, no accounts, no acknowledgement of how stone was made to behave this way.